Welcome to Higher Dimensions. This is your host, Aaron Tomlinson. I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos. I've been on vacation in July, had a few medical challenges with my kids and myself, and nothing serious, just life. But anyway, I'm excited to get back at it. I'm going to do some more posts on shadow work and on spirit guides, angels. But in this one, I want to talk about beliefs. I want to talk about something that's very fundamental to our existence and our reality. So let's talk about what is a belief. A belief starts out as a thought. It's a thought that we have that we mull over, think about, and repeat to ourselves. So the more that we repeat a thought to ourselves, the more that we hear it, the more that we say it, the more that we say it to ourselves, the more real it becomes to us, the more true it seems to be. Now, psychologists differentiate between a thought and a belief by saying that a belief is actually a thought that has an emotional investment. It has a feeling to it. So when we begin to feel something and begin to have emotion around a thought, it begins to become a belief. Now, here's the thing about feelings. Every feeling that we have registers somewhere in our body. We've never felt something outside our body unless it comes into contact with our body and we touch it. That's true in the physical world, but it's also true of our emotions. When we have a feeling, our nervous system begins to react to that thought. And so in this way, that thought begins to become hardwired into our physical makeup. Our belief really, literally becomes part of our biology. So now it is seeming to be even more true, even more real to us than it was before. So that's why it becomes a belief. When a thought becomes emotionally invested and becomes a belief, we automatically begin to be drawn to and seek out people who share that same belief. When we meet people who share the same belief, there's a resonance that takes place with us. So pretty soon our social circle becomes made up of people who have the same thought or who have the same beliefs. Now, if we become very passionate about that belief, we then begin to form groups that proliferate that belief or advance that belief. And now we're investing our time, we're investing our money probably into that belief. And so now it's become our life. Our money and our time represents our life upon this earth. So you can see how a thought becomes repetitive in our minds. It becomes a feeling that becomes hardwired and part of our body. It becomes part of our social circle, and it becomes part of our life. And once we've invested our life into it, then you could say that our belief has become something that we have sworn an allegiance to. So now someone else comes along and they have a different thought. They think differently than us. Maybe they have a thought that's contradictory or a thought or a belief that challenges us. We're presented with new information. Now remember, the belief that we hold to so dearly began as a thought. It began as information. When that contrary information comes, if it's at the first stage of just of just thought, then we can sort through those thoughts and think about those thoughts in an objective manner. When a thought comes that challenges our belief that has become dominant in our life, something that we've sworn allegiance to, now it's not just a thought that's being challenged, it is actually our life, our existence that's being challenged. So when that belief that we've sworn allegiance to becomes challenged, the person is not just challenging a thought with another thought, that person is challenging our very life. So then that person becomes a threat. That person probably did the same thing. So they're a part of one group, we're a part of another group. So pretty soon there's all kinds of division. There's sort of an us against them sort of mentality. And out of this, there rises then all kinds of conflicts and difficulties and battles. It also becomes very difficult for us to be objective because our life is built around this thought. And so in that sense, we lose objectivity. Now, here's the tricky thing about finding out what is really true or real, rooted in reality. Because, let me back up and say this. What if the thought that we programmed ourselves with has no basis in truth or reality? What if our thought is not logical? What if our thought can't really hold up to scrutiny? When we've pledged allegiance to it, when we've built our life around it, it becomes very, very difficult for us to change that, because we have a predisposition now to believe that. So if someone comes along, challenges our belief, if we're religious and we think that God gave us those beliefs and that God actually thinks like we think, then it becomes, we can get mystical about it and say, well, the Holy Spirit is checking me. I don't have a peace about that. God's not this is causing me confusion, and God's not the author of confusion. He's the author of peace. But really, it has nothing to do with God. It's just a basic human quality that we all do that leads to a lot of conflicts, and in worst cases, it even leads to wars. And so it can become difficult for us to change. So what if that belief isn't rooted in reality or thought? So then how do we know what's real? Well, you could say, well, we need to look at where the evidence is leading us. That's what a lot of people say. We need to look at where the evidence is leading us. And so in various different disciplines, you have evidence. I'll take two that I'm most familiar with, psychology and theology. So in theology and biblical scholarship, we can say, well, we need to go where the evidence is leading us. And so maybe we look at scholars who have studied the culture in which the Bible was written. Let's take the person of Jesus of Nazareth. You can find lots of scholars that say Jesus was a good practicing Jew. He was from the Pharisaical tradition. But then you can find other scholars who say, no, he comes out of the mystical tradition of the ancient Near East, and he acts more like a mystic than he does like a Jew. And then others say, no, he acts more like a Jew than he acts like a mystic. In the case, there are scholars on both sides who use original sources to extrapolate their ideas and support their ideas, and we're left trying to decide which one is more accurate. We'll probably go with the one that fits our personal disposition based on the thoughts and beliefs that we believe, and say, yes, this one's right. But again, it's not objective reality, it's subjective. If we take psychology, I'll just give one example. There's a intervention practice out there for trauma that's known as EMDR. EMDR. There's people who absolutely swear by EMDR and say it's almost like a magic pill for healing trauma. And then there are other disciplines out there that say, no, there's absolutely no scientific basis for EMDR. The best a person gets from EMDR is a placebo effect, and so they'll go a different way with interventions and take a different approach. Who's right? Maybe it doesn't really matter. The interesting thing about all of this is that Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he forbid the taking of oaths. He said, don't ever take an oath. He said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. From one perspective, it could be, you could look at that and say, well, Jesus is saying, have integrity. You don't have to take an oath if you're always telling the truth. If you're congruent with your yes and you're congruent with your no, then you don't have to take an oath. But I think it runs deeper than that, because Jesus said if you take an oath, it's actually evil. He said anything more than this is from the evil one. Anything more than just letting your yes be yes and your no be no is from the evil one. What if he's talking about not swearing allegiances? What if he's putting that truth or that thought out there for us to think about, because it actually gives us the freedom to change our mind? When you take a belief in the way I've described it, your social circle, your money, your emotional investment, your repetition to yourself, in essence, what you've done is you've sworn allegiance, you've made an oath. So perhaps we've made too much of beliefs. So when we think about it, we can think about our experience of reality is totally subjective. Our beliefs are totally subjective, and perhaps there's something deeper than just a belief. Perhaps we have a life essence that is unchangeable, that is permanent, that is at the core of our being. Perhaps that I that I talk about when I say I changed my mind is something other than my mind, something other than my thoughts. Perhaps the I that experiences the waves of emotion that I have as my circumstances change is actually the experiencer. And perhaps this is what the gospel is about. It's about discovering the Christ in you, the root and foundation of all being, as being a part of you and inside of you rather than something that's outside of you. What if we allow ourselves to identify with that part of us and identify less with our thoughts, our feelings, our social group? And in that way, then we're maybe freer to change our mind. We're maybe freer to be open to new information. And we're freer, definitely, to love people and include people who think differently than us so that we don't get stuck in this us versus them kind of dilemmas that we see played out in just about every level of our society and human existence. What happens when we over-identify with a belief is we end up with all kinds of the egoic mind identifies with those things. So that the self is made up of the beliefs, the feelings, the thoughts, the life experience. And so when the thought is challenged, then we're challenged. It's really our ego that's challenged, and it's our ego that fights back. So anyway, just something for you to think about. I want to encourage you, it's okay to think critically, it's okay to question, it's okay to change your mind, because that's how we grow in our experience of life. And I believe ultimately, if we can understand some of these things, then perhaps we can begin to create a better world for ourselves. And in doing so, begin to have healthier families, healthier relationships, have a healthier society, and find some things that bring us together in commonality. Jesus said that what would bring us together would be love for each other, and that includes acceptance of our differences, never gathering together around an ideology, but gathering together around commonalities and gathering together around the basis of love, which is not egoic, a totally different way of living and being. So I hope this helped you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll look forward to new videos that I'll be doing on shadow and some other stuff. I'm going to do some more stuff on shadow work. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd like to invite you to do so. If this blessed you, maybe you could share it with others. Thank you again for joining me for this episode, and I hope wherever you're at, whatever time it is as you're watching this, that it's great for you.